There are many different types of assessments that can be created in eDoctrina. A rubric-based assessment is one excellent way to utilize the teacher-completed tool in the program. This tutorial will walk you through creating a rubric-based assessment and then navigating to the teacher dashboard to open the teacher-completed screen to grade the assessment. Your first step after logging into eDoctrina would be to click the Assessments main button on the eDoctrina homepage. Since we will be creating a brand new item from scratch, we will click on this gold Insert button below the Assessments heading in the top left corner. This will open up our Edit Assessment screen, where you will first be brought to the General tab. Any filter marked with a red asterisk would be a mandatory field. So for name, I will name this Line Graph Rubric. I'll leave the date as today. The year will automatically filter to the new school year. I'm selecting my 4th grade math class to build this rubric for. You will have to label your assessment as a type. This has no bearing on the assessment. It's more for an organizational piece. The next step after labeling your assessment with a type would be the option of linking your assessment to a course. I'll select the course of Grade 4 Math. I also have the option to link this assessment to a pre-existing unit in eDoctrina if I so choose. My final step on the General tab will be to decide what type of assessment am I building. If I navigate to the top right corner of the screen, I have two options. Is this an answer key only test, or am I creating the questions from scratch and linking standards? Since I'm building a rubric-based assessment, it will always need to be in the questions and standards view. After selecting questions and standards, I'm scrolled down to my questions section. This is where I'll click the Add Questions button. When thinking about rubrics, you need to change the language in your head. Instead of adding questions, we will really be adding categories. The rubric that I'm going to build in eDoctrina is going to be a line graph rubric. It looks something like this. By looking at my screen, I can see that I have 3 categories. Titles and labels would be 1, organization would be 2, and data would be 3. This rubric is out of a total of 4 points. I'm now going back to eDoctrina, and when I'm clicking my Add Questions button, I'm really thinking of how many categories am I adding. I mentioned that my rubric had 3 categories. When building a rubric, the type of question, or really the type of category, always 100% of the time will be teacher scored. Your max points will be how many points or levels your rubric is out of. If I take a look at my rubric once more, I know that it's out of 4 total points. So my max points will be 4. Once I've entered in my information into these fields, I'll click Add. And 3 empty question shells or category shells have loaded. My next step would be to scroll on up to the first question, but really in my head I'm thinking category. And to add category information for rubrics, you're going behind the scenes. Nothing's going to be typed on this screen. You'll actually hover over this RB button where it says Add Edit Rubric. This is where you're going to be plugging in the bulk of your information. Once I click on this RB button, my rubric window will open and I'll begin typing in my category description. The category description for my first category, if I take a look back at my rubric, is going to be titles and labels. Once I've plugged in my category, my next step would be to plug in my levels. For 1 point, I'll refer back to my rubric. To begin adding the category descriptions for each level, you can either copy and paste the text into each cell or simply type. After entering in the information for level 1, I'll move on to levels 2, 3, and 4. After I've entered in my text for each level, I also have the option to color code. For example, 1 point may be highlighted in red, 2 points may be yellow, 3 points blue, and 4 points will be green. Once I'm done entering in my information behind the scenes for my rubric, I'll click the Save button. It's going to close out of this window and bring me back to my Edit Assessment screen. Nothing is going to happen on this screen. If you want to make sure that the text you just entered is still there, you can always click back on the RB button, which will open up your Edit Rubric screen. I'm confirming that all of my information is here and correct, so then I can cancel out. I'm going to do the exact same steps for categories 2 and 3. Moving on to my second category, I'm clicking on the RB button. Again, to check what my category description is, I'll open up my rubric. My second category is going to be organization. So I'll jump back to eDoctrina and begin typing in my rubric text. I've entered in my text for each individual level, so my next step will be to color code. Again, for 1 point, I'll mark this with red, 2 will be yellow, 3 will be blue, and 4 will be green. Again, I'll save out of this window. It's going to bring me back to my Edit Assessment screen. Nothing is going to happen on this screen, but I can always click back on that RB button to make sure that my information is there and saved. Now I'm ready to move on to my final category. For number 3, I'll click on the RB button, open up my line graph rubric once more. This final category is data, and I'll begin typing in my leveled text. My text for my individual levels has been entered, so now I'm going to color code once more. Red for level 1, yellow for level 2, blue for level 3, and green for level 4. I'll click Save out of this screen. It brings me back to my Edit Assessment. Once my rubric text has been entered behind the scenes, I can absolutely link standards to each individual rubric category if I so choose. I'll select the subject of mathematics for grade 4, and I'll select algebra. Just to show you the ease of linking standards, these standards may not match with my category descriptions. Once you find the standard you want to include and link to your question or your category, you'll click it, drag it, and drop it into this green box under the Standards heading. You have the ability to link multiple standards to a question or category. You can also mix and match standard subjects. So, for example, if you wanted to include mathematics and ELA standards to a particular assessment question, you can absolutely do that. Now I'm in ELA for grade 4. I'll select the standard, drag, and drop. After I'm done linking standards to individual rubric categories, I'm ready to save and close out of my rubric assessment and open it on the Teacher Completed screen. I'll click the Save and Close button in the top right corner of my screen. It's going to bring me back to my assessments main page. There are several different ways for you to find the assessment you just created. One easy trick is to use these reshuffle arrows at the top of each column. Every item created in eDoctrina is given an ID number. If you select the ID column to reshuffle from Z to A, which would mean highest ID number to lowest, the newest item you've just created will show right at the top of your list. A good tip to remember, the newest item created has the highest ID number. You can also search for items by what you name them. So I know I named this line graph. And your item will pop right up. Also, if you took note of the ID number that your assessment was given, you can search for it that way. Now we are ready to navigate to the teacher dashboard to open this rubric in our Teacher Completed tool. There are several ways to get to the teacher dashboard. I always select Quick Links in the top left corner and then Teacher Dashboard. Once you're on the teacher dashboard, you'll need to filter to find your assessment that you've just created. The filter pane has two sets of filters. Who are you printing these assessments for, or who are you opening this assessment on the Teacher Completed screen to give to? And also, where is the assessment coming from? My first step is to select my course and my class. I only have to select the filters that are marked with the red asterisks. The Select Students filter works itself on its own based on the class you've selected. By it saying all students, this simply means all of the students in this particular class. Next, I'll move down to my Select Assessments filters. I created the test in my Key West School District. I can skip past subject and grade and jump right to the assessment filter. I know that I named this with the line graph rubric. So once I start typing in those letters, the assessment will pop right up and I can select it. Once I've selected the assessment, I'll click off of this window and I'm going to pick the Enter Student Responses button. If I hover over this button, a message pops up saying, click here to manually enter data using the Teacher Completed tool. This is definitely what we want. There have been several updates to the Teacher Completed tool. One of our new updates is that the screen saves automatically. This message just notifies you of that, so I can tell eDoctrina to don't tell me this again and then dismiss. On this screen, I have my assessment or my rubric, and then on the left-hand side, my roster of students from the class that I selected on the teacher dashboard. I can change how my questions or my categories in my rubric show by moving this width and height bar. This Teacher Completed screen is an excellent tool to use if you're conferencing with a student or if you're observing a student. To select a student, I would click on their name on the left-hand side. I know that the student is selected once their name is highlighted. Also, their name will show directly above the questions or categories of my assessment. I've selected Hillary. I can clearly see each rubric category listed below. Number 1, titles and labels, 2, organization, and 3, data. To score each of these pieces for Hillary, I would simply click on the drop-down arrows for each category, and here is where my back-end rubric information will show. For titles and labels, I'll select a 3. For organization, I'll select a 2, and for data, I'll select a 4. You may have noticed each time I select an answer for Hillary, a number would jump to the right of her name. Each time an answer is selected, the number will be highlighted in orange until all answers have been selected. Then the color will turn to green. Watch again as I do it with Neil. For Neil, question number 1, I'll select Level 1. Notice how it changes to a 1 in an orange bubble. Number 2, I'll select a 4. Now he has a 2 in an orange bubble. And for 3, once I select the answer here, his bubble will change to green. Another nice feature on the Teacher Completed screen is that it provides the score for each student along with their percent score. Each question or category on the Teacher Completed screen also allows the teacher to enter student responses or teacher comments. By clicking on this talk bubble, it's going to open a brand new window where I can type in the student response or any teacher comments I may have. You can also preload a list of comments and select either your school's comments or your own comments. To create new comments, you would simply click on this plus button. Another way to very quickly score assessments from the Teacher Completed screen would be using these minimum or maximum buttons to the right of the students' names. If you select the max button, that would default all of the students' answers to correct. So now Jesse has a 100% and he received 4 total points for each piece of the rubric. This is helpful if you have a large assessment. You only have to switch the correct answers from yes to no instead of selecting every answer for every single question. You can also do the same but in reverse by clicking on the minimum button. This now defaults all of Ted's answers to the lowest level, or level 1. There are a few advantages of using the Teacher Completed screen. 1, it eliminates bubble sheets, so there's no need to print bubble sheets for each student and take the time to scan and wait for the turnaround time for your data to appear. Along those same lines, every click you make is saved and you're able to pull data immediately for each student. So once I'm done from this screen, I would click the close button. It's going to bring me back to my teacher dashboard, and now I'm able to pull reports on any of those students that I just scored on that Teacher Completed screen. Since I only scored a few students' rubrics, I'll select just those students from my Select Students filter. Once I have my students selected, I'm ready to pull my data reports. There are certain reports you can pull that show off the rubric text and color coding. The first example would be by clicking on the individual student report. You will want to select the format of standards with rubric text instead of standards. By clicking OK, I'll see the individual report for each of my students. Here I'm able to see the rubric text along with the color coding aligned to each level of my rubric. Jesse was defaulted as all correct, if you remember, whereas Ted was defaulted as all incorrect, which is why you're seeing all red for Ted. Hillary scored a level 3 for titles and labels, 2 points for organization, and 4 points for data. Neil scored 1 point for titles and labels, 4 points for organization, and 2 points for data. Another report that you are able to pull that will show the benefits of linking your rubric text and color coding would be the Student Standards report. First, I would select Student Standards, and then I would choose to show the rubric text. This will give you a breakdown of each category up at the top. Your students are on the left-hand side. You have your rubric text and color coding. One benefit of this report is the ability to reshuffle your columns. So if you wanted to see who scored the lowest in the category of data, I can reshuffle from A to Z. Using these reshuffle arrows will organize the students from who scored best to who scored the lowest. Just a quick recap of a few things you will want to remember when building rubric-based assessments in eDoctrina. Rubrics are always 100% of the time teacher-scored items. Rubrics are easily and best scored on the teacher-completed screen. Also, when creating rubrics, please feel free to play with the color coding to enhance your reports.